Jason, good to see you
Garth.
as always, my
Garth.
friend.
Yes, it's fun to be back in the studio with you.
Yeah, back in the studio. I love it. Um, Jason, you're a hockey fan.
I am.
Yeah, who's your favorite hockey team?
It's a complicated question. I've got one boy who cheers for the Flames, another boy who cheers for the Edmonton Oilers. I grew up an Oilers fan, but I live in Calgary. So,
Yeah,
I'm one of these, people you'd see probably wearing a split jersey, Oilers, Calgary. I mean, 9 times out of 10, I'm probably a Flames fan because I've got season tickets
yeah,
over there. But you know what? Come playoff time, no choice these days but to be an Oilers fan. So it's a
yeah.
complicated relationship, Garth.
It is. It's a complicated relationship. I love that, and I love that you brought us to like playoff time. So I want to talk a
Mm-hmm.
little bit to set up our conversation. I want to talk a little bit about what it means to get on the bandwagon.
Mm-hmm.
But more significantly, what does it mean to get off the bandwagon? So, have you ever found yourself, as an Oilers fan, let's say, being like, this is our year, and then they maybe lose 4 games in a row, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm out? Or are you a tried, tested, and true fan?
Well, you know what? At the start of this year's playoff series, I was pretty nervous about the Oilers, and I didn't think they were going to go as deep as they did. And I was 1 foot off. I was 1 foot off. But you know what? As a fan, I think you got to stick with it. I
Mm,
tell people that I grew up a Rough Riders fan, Saskatchewan Rough Riders fan, and I didn't even know the playoffs existed. I didn't know they were a thing because they were so bad in the '80s. They never went to the postseason. So, I think I grew up just knowing what it was to be a resilient sports fan, and I hold that to this day.
well, as you may know, Toronto.
I know, I know.
I'm a long-suffering Leafs
Gareth, I wasn't
fan.
going to ask because it's so sensitive with you Ontarian
But
folks.
here's the thing, hope isn't a strategy, but it's vital to leadership, right?
It's
And I
true.
think it leads to joy, and the concept of joy is one of these things that hockey teams give us. And joy is nothing if we have nothing to compare it against. So our teams will have bad days, but we as a fan can persevere for them. And that kind of leads us into our conversation to wrap up our three podcast series about Phoebe Trotman's book, Never Quit on a Bad Day. Because as a Leaf fan, you just can't.
You just can't, and you shouldn't. Never quit on a bad day, Garth. Stick with
Yeah,
it. The Leafs someday will win a cup. Someday, it's inevitable.
someday. It's
But for
inevitable.
now, I think everybody can pick up this book by Phoebe and listen to this podcast and start to think about the resilience might be required by those Leafs fans hanging on. So
Yeah,
I
because
hope,
the season's starting soon. So
yeah,
there you
I hope
go.
everybody enjoys this show.
All right, enjoy.
Lassoing leadership, sharp and true. Beard's Book Club got wisdom for you. Turn the pages, let the stories flow. Unpacking lessons as we grow.
Welcome back to Lassoing Leadership. I'm Jason Rogers.
Hey, folks, I'm Garth Nichols. And today we're wrapping up our 3-part Beards Book Club journey with Never Quit on a Bad Day by Phoebe Trotman. And she was an amazing guest. We've introduced the book, we've had an incredible conversation with Phoebe herself, and now we're going to try and pull it all together, the big leadership lessons that we're taking away with your insights, with your questions, and of course, Jason's opinions.
Yeah, Garth, this is one of the podcasts that sticks with you, sticks with me. It's going to stick with our listeners. I mean, Phoebe's energy, her humility, her vulnerability,
Mm,
her ability to turn personal challenge into fuel for purpose. It's contagious. She's just a lightning rod for, performance, for resilience, for all of these
yeah.
things. She just does lift people up.
Yeah. And for me, authenticity. Like she was
Mhm.
just not just talking about resilience, it's like in a buzzword type of way. This book, the conversation, like she's lived it through sport, her career transitions, her work in coaching. And one of the things that she said that really struck me was that character is a daily decision, not a one-time achievement. And this is sort of in the theme of, you know, just perseverance, like showing up. And as an athlete, I consider myself an athlete. It's like more and more people are just talking about it's not performance, it's consistency, right?
Mhm.
Showing up all the times. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we drop book titles all the time, but I mean, Atomic Habits by James Clear is really the
Yeah.
Bible for this work, and it's something worth revisiting, once or once a year, once every 2 years, kind of in our leadership practice, because there's so much wisdom in there. And I think it ties so closely to what Phoebe's talking about
Wisdom
here.
and strategies. Wisdom and
Wisdom
strategies.
and
Yeah.
strategies. You're totally right. And it connects directly to this title, Never Quit on a Bad Day. The way Phoebe frames it, quitting isn't about never stopping. Sorry, isn't about never stopping anything. It's about making big decisions when you're in a low moment. It's such a powerful lens for leadership at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder for us too. Like we've all had those tough days when enrollment numbers aren't where we want them, or
Mm-hmm.
conflict in the community has us feeling a bit drained. Phoebe's advice is, you got this. You've got the tools, you've got the ability. Don't just wait to let it pass, but actually be intentional about how you are making decisions in those moments.
And I think, I think that idea of letting something pass is important too, Garth, because to be able to do that, we have to have patience and we got to
Yeah.
have faith. I think
Yeah.
that's, the idea of never quitting on a bad day allows you to sit back and say, I'm going to be patient. I'm going to continue on. I've got faith that things are going to resolve themselves. They're going to get better. They're going to have better days. Phoebe really does drive that home through stories with other athletes and her own story in our podcast. And one of my favorite moments in the interview is when she talked about her role of the role of joy in leadership. She said something like, if you've lost your joy, your team feels it before you do. And it's such a great gut check. I really do think that, sometimes we're so naive, or maybe we've got an ego, or maybe we just don't see the world clearly, but, people are seeing you more clearly than you believe they are. So, so I think it's important to be honest with our emotions, with the people around us, but also, be honest with ourselves about our emotions and what we're going through.
Yeah, a couple people wrote in actually talking about how Phoebe sort of inspired them to go back to their why. And it's relevant in education because the joy isn't just for us, it ripples to our staff, to our students, and our families. This idea of like finding your why, being so in touch with your why, is a direct pathway to joy. Even in the hardest moments, you can say these hard moments will pay off in the end. So it's actually a strategic asset to lead with joy.
And a pivot from the why as well is to think about purpose. And you probably know where I'm going with this, Garth, is, we had a great interview with Tim and Bell, and talking about how to navigate life, and purpose-filled work is another way of looking at the why. I mean, if Cynics Start With Why really resonates with you and that works for you, then go get it. I mean, that's a great way to frame it up. But there are other ways to look at it too. And I think it's like looking through purpose has been a pretty important and impactful thing for both of us, I think, over time. And certainly since having met Tim and Bell, it's been really important to us. Phoebe also gives us a framework for reframing setbacks. She talks about them as being setups. It's that whole notion of failing forward, if you will. It's set up for what's next. And I love it because it's not toxic positivity. It's grounded in effort, reflection, and the belief that adversity can be our best teacher. And I truly think it can be, for sure.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up, because when you're talking about being misinterpreted as toxic positivity, that speaks to, you just have to be intentional with it, and you have to have be like, oh, this will pass, and oh, we're going to get through this together. But it's like, be intentional. How are you going to get through this together? And what does getting through this actually look, sound, and feel like? And so it connects for me with another one of her big themes, and something that's near and dear to my heart too, is like, you have to have alignment with your values and making sure that your daily actions are lining up with them. And that's why when you're in these moments of a bad day, your values might seem pretty blurry. Your values might seem pretty far away. And so she was clear that, so you said earlier, Jason, you take the time, have that patience. It takes discipline when things get harder to hold your values and have those values-based decisions. And I just love that this was brought to life in her story about her mom, and how vulnerable she got. Yeah, I really appreciated that.
Now, Garth, it drives a question. I'm going to ask you the question. I mean, if we're sitting down, we're empathizing with somebody, and they come in, they say, Garth, I've got nothing left in the tank here. You talk about perseverance, you talk about resilience all of the time, but I've got none of it right now. And they have lots of ways of saying it. Like, they could say it directly, but rarely I think they would. but they
Yeah.
probably come in and say it in a different way. They probably would be oppositional, or they might be confrontational, or they might just be really apathetic. But in
Mm.
one way or another, they're presenting the fact that their resilience or the perseverance is absolute zero. What do you do as a leader to address that? Like, where do you go with that?
It's a great question. Thank you. I'd also add that like behavior is a language,
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
leaders have to be observant, how, not just what people are
Mm-hmm.
saying, not just what's in front of them, but also how people are walking around the building or behaving around the building. I think that my first instinct would be to ask them, "Are you okay?"
Mm-hmm.
And let them talk that out a little bit. Make them, thinking back to Kurt Gray, our
Yes, of
first
course.
book in the book club, right? Really connect with them. This is a different type of emotion than outrage, but I think his format really still applies. So just reach out, hold that space. I'm listening. Invite them to tell them more, um, and just know. And then I'm trying in my head as I'm speaking to you about this, Jason. I'm trying
Yeah.
not to go directly to action, but then when enough time and space are held, you can then say, "How can I support you?" And I think that is something that's sort of my gut instinct there. Yeah. What about you, Jason? How would you answer that question?
Well, I think you've started with connection, so I'm just going to continue with invitation. I think
Mm,
sometimes even a unsolicited invitation is really a powerful thing. I
sure.
sometimes think about, I read once about, I think it's a book called Never Quit, but it was about Navy SEAL training, and they were talking about the carrying of the raft and how nobody gets through carrying the raft unscathed. There's always, everybody drops off at some point, and
Mm,
the other Navy SEALs continue on carrying the raft for them, and then the person who drops off comes along, picks up the raft, and certainly,
yeah.
sure enough, somebody else is going to drop off. So I think that invitation to say, we're here to help you, is, if we were able to provide you support, would that help? Sometimes that uninvited invitation for support is a really powerful thing. And
Mm,
people, in my experience, sometimes take you up on it. They say,
yeah.
yes, thank you. That's the gift I was looking for today. And
Yeah.
sometimes they don't. But at the end of the day, as a leader of an organization, I think it's our obligation to put that invitation forward when we're recognizing that in somebody who's around us. And part of our job too is be solution focused and figure it out, because sometimes those things do leave tremendous gaps in the work that have to be done. But if you have a strong team, you've got those Navy SEALs as part of your organization, you continue to march along.
There's a great analogy that you and I could sort of play out here. The raft, keep your head above water. But I think what I take from your example here is that you're just telling them like they're not alone,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
In all of that, and that kind of speaks to Phoebe talking about having her own personal board of directors, and I love that
Yeah.
that notion. You need mentors, you need fire extinguishers, fire like people who will fan your flames like in a
Yeah.
positive way. Um, People who are grounded have different perspectives that they can bring to you. I love that. And I think that works into this, when someone comes in, encouraging them, like, who do you have to go to?
Yeah.
What fills you up and all those great pieces. So yeah, thanks
I
for that,
can't tell
Jason.
you how often I think about that personal board of directors. Come up with a
I know.
few of our guests. It's, and, I think about it all the time, and I think curating those and keeping that board of directors tight and together and in touch, I think, is a really important strategy.
And
I also,
we'll like we will have more talk about this because we're having another guest back later on. Not sure when. Ashish Advani,
I
he's
know,
the CEO of Junior Achievement Worldwide, and he talks a lot about mentorship and a personal board of directors, which I love too.
yeah,
So you look
yeah. And
forward to
there's,
more of that, listeners.
and there's no better compliment. Since we've been doing this podcast, I've had a few listeners reach out, and not formally but informally, I can feel the invitation to be a part of their personal board of directors, and those conversations has been
I
really,
know.
really nice. And it brings me to thinking about our listeners, school leaders, teachers, coaches. What's the takeaway here? For me, it's truly, perseverance isn't just endurance, it's intentional. It's choosing
Mhm.
how to respond, how to model resilience, and how to keep your community moving forward during those difficult and challenging times.
Yeah, and I think for me, I would agree with you, and then add perseverance is relational. You can't
Oh,
do it
yeah.
in isolation, right? You need
Yeah.
those people carrying the raft with you. I'm going to use that analogy now. Phoebe's stories are like they're full of them, right? Full of mentors and teammates and friends, people who had her back, and subsequently she had theirs, and And I think that's so true in a school where we rely on a lot of people, where we have such a shared drive towards a mission. It's as true as in a school as it is on a soccer pitch, baseball diamond, in a play, rehearsals, like all of those things. I think it really counts.
So maybe, Garth, that's the challenge we leave our listeners with.
Mm,
Who's in your corner, or perhaps even better, who's at your board table? And instead of just sitting back and thinking about it, we
nice.
challenge you to write it down, almost as though
Yeah.
you're going to put it on a web page, your personal web page, your personal board of directors. Why are they there? How long have they served? What value are they bringing? And then lean into it and find ways to curate and nurture that board of directors to support you, so that you can show up for others when you're having a bad day. And I think that's really your own version of never quit on a bad day, and your leadership team.
I'm gonna do it right now.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Right after we end this podcast, that's what I'm gonna do. So thank you. And hey, listen, if you haven't picked up Phoebe's book, pick it up. If you have, pick it up again. It's practical, it's inspiring. It's the kind of read that you will come back to when you need a reset. And they're beautiful, quick stories. So keep it close.
Garth, you said it before. This is a great gift. This is, but also a great gift to our youth. This is a book that connects with, I would say, anybody over the age of 12, and certainly those individuals in our lives who are look to sports for inspiration and identity. And I think look to this book and look to Phoebe's wisdom. I think it gives so much back. And we want our listeners obviously to listen back to that full interview with her. You'll hear the conviction in her voice. We don't believe that this is a theory. We believe this is lived wisdom from Phoebe.
Yeah. And again, Jason and I deeply, deeply grateful for Phoebe sharing her story, and being such a fan of the podcast, and like living her purpose, living her mission with joy, with presence, and with purpose.
All right. So until next time, keep reading, and keep leading, and keep persevering, and keep doing all of those things the Lasso way. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Oh, I love it. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Grab your coffee, grab your seat. It's time to learn, it's time to meet. Garth and Jason setting the tone. Leadership lessons to take back home. Lassoing leadership sharp and true. Beard's Book Club got wisdom for you. Turn the pages, let the stories flow. Unpacking lessons as we grow. Keep leading the lasso way. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones and let's start the show. With lessons from Ted, we'll learn and grow. Lassoing leadership sharp and true. Beard's Book Club got wisdom for you. Turn the pages, let the stories flow. Unpacking lessons